single dad, answered a knock at 2 a.m. She was shivering gorgeous and said, "You feel familiar." The wine glasses clinked like fragile nerves as a string quartet played in perfect soulless harmony. From the outside, it was a perfect evening, white candles flickering in tall crystal vases, a $1,000 cake poised to be cut, guests glittering with borrowed charm. But Isabelle Leroux was drowning in silk and silence. She stood beside her fiancé, Andrew Harrington III, whose smile was carved from polished ambition. His hand rested on the small of her back, too firm, too practiced. She smiled politely at the crowd gathered in the rooftop ballroom of Manhattan's most exclusive hotel, but her fingers trembled against the flute of champagne. Then her phone buzzed. A single message. From a junior legal associate she once mentored someone brave or foolish enough to tell her the truth. Prenup redline updated. Hidden clause, all holdings to transfer to Harrington Ventures upon marriage dissolution. He's covering his tracks fast. Thought you should know. For one perfect breaking second, the room stilled. Isabel blinked. Once. Twice. The chandeliers above blurred the room, stretched and curved around her. Andrew leaned in, still smiling for the crowd. Ready to be Mrs. Harrington. Her mouth was dry. She placed the glass down slowly. "Excuse me," she whispered, already turning. "Where are you going?" he asked under his breath, fingers tightening on her wrist. She pulled away. "I need air." She didn't wait, didn't think. Her heels clicked across marble past shocked guests, past murmurs and confused glances through gilded doors and out into the icy Manhattan night. Outside, the city was muffled under snow, the kind of snow that swallowed sound and logic. Her breath came fast. Her skin stung in the open air. Bare shoulders, thin dress, no coat, no phone. She walked blindly past the black SUVs waiting by the curb, past the valet shouting her name. The sequins on her dress caught the light of passing taxis like fallen stars, but no one stopped. No one recognized the woman who'd once graced the cover of Forbes Women to Watch under 35. Tonight, she was just a runaway bride with frozen fingers and something broken behind her ribs. She walked for blocks, heels snapping against icy sidewalks until one cracked beneath her. She fell hard, scraping her palm and tearing the side of her gown. She sat on the pavement, blinking at the snow, her breath catching in her chest. And then she laughed. It came out like a choke, half sob, half surrender. The snow was coming down harder now, clinging to her lashes, her lips, her disbelief. There was nowhere to go. Her feet led her away from the city's glossy facade down quieter streets, older blocks. Eventually, she wandered into a neighborhood where porch lights burned a little warmer, where homes still had paint that chipped and fences that leaned. She stopped in front of a small single-story house with a flickering porch light and a child's drawing taped crookedly in the front window. There was no reason for her to choose it, except that it didn't feel cold. She climbed the short steps and knocked once, twice, 3 times. Then she sagged against the doorframe, her body shivering violently now, lips, numb arms wrapped around herself. Her skin throbbed from the fall, but that wasn't what hurt. The door opened. A man stood in the doorway, late 30s, rough around the edges in a hoodie and worn jeans. His hair was messy, his jaw stubbled, and he blinked at her like he hadn't yet decided if she was real or a ghost made of snow and regret. She tried to smile. "I'm sorry. I didn't know where else to go." He looked past her down the street, then back. "Are you hurt? She nodded toward her scraped arm. "Not really. Just lost. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just—" Her voice cracked. "You feel familiar. I don't know why." His eyes narrowed. He stepped outside, instinctively wrapping an arm around her shoulders to guide her in. Inside, the warmth wrapped around her like a quilt. There was a small couch, a cluttered coffee table with crayon drawings and juice boxes. A slow lullaby hummed from a baby monitor on the counter. He gently sat her on the couch and grabbed a blanket from the armrest. "I'll get you some tea. Don't go passing out, okay?" She managed a faint nod. The man disappeared into the kitchen and she let her eyes wander the room. There were family photos, just the man and a little girl with curly hair and wide eyes. No sign of a woman. No glamour. No lies. He returned with tea and a first aid kit. "I'm Daniel," he said, kneeling to clean her scrape. "You got a name?" She hesitated. "Belle." A pause. He didn't push. "You're lucky it was my house," he said. "Anyone else might have called the cops. I wouldn't blame them." He looked up. His eyes were kind but guarded. People don't just knock on a stranger's door at 2 a.m., wearing a $5,000 dress, unless something really bad happened. She sipped the tea. It scalded, but she needed it. Something did. He sat across from her. "Well, you're safe now. But just so you know, I've got a 6-year-old asleep in the next room. If you're dangerous, I'll throw you back into the snow." A smile tugged at her lips. The first real one in months. "I'm not dangerous, just tired of pretending." Daniel studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "We all are, eventually." The wind howled outside. Inside, silence settled like trust, tentative, fragile, and just beginning. Tomorrow would bring questions. But tonight, all that mattered was that someone had opened the door. And for the first time in her life, Isabelle LaRue felt like she hadn't walked into a house, she'd found a home. Isabelle woke to the scent of coffee and the creak of an old house coming alive. The blanket around her shoulders was thick and soft, worn from use. Sunlight filtered through the living room blinds in narrow golden lines, and somewhere in the kitchen a pan sizzled. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then it hit her hard and quiet, the wedding, the message, the snow, the knock. Her fingers instinctively reached for the edge of the couch, grounding her in the unfamiliar room that had somehow become her sanctuary for the night. Footsteps. She sat up quickly, smoothing her tangled hair. Daniel appeared in the doorway holding a spatula and looking half amused, half wary. "You're awake," he said, voice low and slightly gravelly like someone who didn't talk much in the mornings. "Didn't think you'd still be here." She opened her mouth, then paused. "I almost wasn't. But I didn't want to leave without saying thank you." He nodded once and disappeared back into the kitchen. She followed the smell of coffee like it was a lifeline. The kitchen was modest but warm. Wooden cabinets, mismatched mugs, a fridge covered in finger-painted art. A little girl with curly hair sat at the table swinging her legs and drawing with a purple crayon. She looked up and blinked at Isabelle with open curiosity. "This is Lily," Daniel said. "She's 6. Lily, this is Miss Belle. She stayed over last night." Isabelle crouched down. "Hi, Lily. That's a beautiful drawing. Is that a unicorn?" "It's me." "I'm riding a flying lion," Lily said proudly. Isabelle laughed a sound that surprised even her. "Of course you are." Lily studied her. "You're really pretty." "Are you a fairy?" Daniel coughed from the stove. "She's just a guest, honey." Lily shrugged and went back to her drawing. Isabelle stood brushing hair behind her ear, embarrassed and touched all at once. "Do you need a ride somewhere?" Daniel asked, sliding a plate of eggs and toast onto the table. "I'm off today. I can take you to a bus stop. Or the police, if that's what you need." She hesitated. "No police, and no bus stop. Not yet." He studied her in silence, and for a moment Isabelle could feel the calculation behind his gaze. He wasn't stupid. He knew something wasn't right. But he wasn't pressing her. Not yet. She took a seat. "Just a couple more hours, if that's okay. I'll be out of your hair by lunch." Daniel poured her a cup of coffee and nodded. "All right. But I like to know who's in my house, Belle, especially around Lily." His voice wasn't sharp, but there was steel underneath. She looked down into her coffee. "I understand." The morning passed quietly. Isabelle offered to wash dishes, and Daniel let her. There was something grounding about scrubbing plates and stacking mugs so different from the world she had run from. No catered meals, no assistants, just soap water and the occasional hum from the little girl playing in the living room. Daniel stepped out back to check on the heater unit, and Isabel took a moment to wander. The house was small but alive. Family photos on the walls, Daniel younger with a woman beside him, smiling. Then newer photos, Daniel with just Lily. There was a soft knock on the doorframe behind her. She turned to see Lily standing there holding a book. "Will you read to me?" the girl asked. Isabel blinked. "You want me to?" Lily nodded. "Dad reads the same story every time. He does the voices, but he skips pages when he's tired." Isabel knelt down and opened the book. "Well, I promise not to skip a single page." They sat on the couch together, and Lily nestled in beside her like they had known each other for months, not hours. Halfway through the story, Daniel returned, pausing in the doorway. He didn't interrupt, just watched. And something softened in his face. Not affection, not yet. But the beginnings of something gentler than suspicion. When the story ended, Lily jumped off the couch. "I'm going to draw you next," she declared. "With wings." Isabel laughed again, and Daniel stepped into the room. "She doesn't usually warm up to people that fast." "She's incredible," Isabel said. "You're a good dad." Daniel looked away. "I'm just doing my best." There was a long pause, comfortable but weighted. Then he said, "You're not homeless. That dress cost more than this house." Isabel swallowed. She could lie again. She could say she was running from a bad relationship or family issues. But something in his voice, honest, tired, unvarnished, made it feel wrong. "No," she admitted quietly. "I'm not homeless." He waited. "I walked out of something last night, something I probably should have never walked into in the first place." Daniel leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Wedding." She nodded. "Yours a beat." Then, "Yes." He gave a low whistle. "Damn." She smiled ruefully. "Yeah." Daniel studied her. "You running from someone who's going to come after you?" "No. Just from a life that doesn't feel like mine." He didn't push further. Just nodded. "I can respect that." Outside, the snow began to melt. Inside, the air between them shifted just slightly, like two people standing on opposite sides of a broken bridge quietly beginning to rebuild it. Daniel turned toward the kitchen. "You want grilled cheese before you go? I make a killer one." Isabel looked down at Lily's drawing herself with wings and a golden crown. She smiled. "Only if you don't skip pages when you tell me how to make it." Daniel chuckled. "Deal." And just like that, the clock kept ticking, but no one moved toward goodbye. The days that followed didn't feel like real days to Isabel. They weren't marked by board meetings or press releases or carefully arranged dinners in high-rise restaurants with impossible views. Here, time passed by the rhythm of small, ordinary things, a morning cartoon theme song, the rustle of Lily's school backpack, and the scent of grilled cheese, always slightly burnt. She hadn't planned to stay past that first morning. But snowstorms had other plans, and Daniel, though quiet and still watching her with cautious eyes, didn't push her out. He didn't ask again about the wedding or her real name. He didn't press her for any truth she wasn't ready to offer. That kind of silence. It was a rare kindness. On the third morning, she rose early just before dawn. The house was dark and still except for the hum of the refrigerator and the slow, even breathing of the man asleep on the recliner, a book face down on his chest. His daughter had fallen asleep in his lap, a crayon still tucked between her fingers. Isabel paused there for a moment, watching them, this quiet pocket of warmth she'd never known she needed. She tiptoed into the kitchen and began making coffee. She didn't know why she was still here. Well, she did. It wasn't the snow. It was how Lily had reached for her hand during a movie the night before without asking anything in return. It was how Daniel, in his quietly worn-out way, had told her she could stay as long as it felt right. Not until you get your life together. Not until you explain yourself. Just as long as it feels right. And somehow it did. Later that afternoon, Daniel returned from a quick job repairing a busted furnace. Lily was at school. Isabel had tidied the living room, reheated leftover soup, and for reasons she couldn't explain, dug into Daniel's scattered papers on the table. "Didn't mean to pry," she said when he walked in, brushing her hands on her jeans. "But your scholarship application for Lily has a few mistakes. Formatting issues mostly. I fixed them if that's okay." Daniel blinked at her, taking the packet. "You read this, I proofread it," she said. "And you should lead with the part about working nights and still volunteering at the shelter. That's the story." He studied her carefully. "You're good at this. I used to read proposals like these every week," she said, and then caught herself. He didn't press. He just said thanks and put the papers gently back in the folder. But something about the moment shifted. His gaze held hers a second longer. There was a question in it, but also a kind of invitation, one that said, "I see you're trying. I won't ask why yet, but I see it." That night, snow fell again, though gentler than before. Isabel stepped out onto the small porch after Lily had gone to bed, wrapped in one of Daniel's flannel jackets. She heard the door creak behind her and felt Daniel join her silently. "You always leave the porch light on?" she asked, not looking at him. "For Lily, mostly," he said. "She says it makes the dark less scary." Isabel nodded. "I used to sleep with a flashlight under my pillow." Daniel glanced at her. "And now," she hesitated. "Now I sleep in silence, but it doesn't feel like rest." A beat of quiet passed. Then he asked, what was he like? She turned to him. His expression wasn't accusatory, just curious, careful. "My fiancé," she said. He nodded. Smart, polished, strategic. He knew exactly what to say to impress a room, but when no one was watching, she swallowed. "He didn't look at me like I was a person, just a role to play." Daniel looked away, jaw tightening. "I know that kind of man. I stayed longer than I should have," she admitted, "because I thought maybe love was supposed to feel that way. Maybe I didn't deserve more." And now he asked softly. She looked up at him, the porch light catching in her eyes. "Now I'm sitting on a porch with a man who fixes heaters and makes grilled cheese like it's an art form. And for the first time in years, I feel human again." Daniel turned to her, a softness blooming in the corners of his expression. "You're more than human, Belle. You're honest." She laughed dryly. "Only now." "Now counts," he said. "Sometimes now is all we've got." The next morning, Lily begged Isabel to braid her hair for school. Daniel watched from the hallway, arms crossed, silently amused. "You're good with her," he said as Isabel twisted the girl's curls. "She's easy to love," Isabel replied. "You say that like it's not something you've done before." "I haven't," she said quietly. "Not like this." Lily turned and gave her a sloppy hug, her small arms warm around Isabel's waist. That was the moment Isabel knew she wasn't just hiding here anymore. She was healing. That evening, Daniel sat with Isabel on the living room floor, while Lily colored nearby. "Why'd you really run?" he asked quietly without preamble. She didn't answer right away. Then, "Because I realized I wasn't just walking into a marriage. I was handing over my name, my choices, and everything I'd built. And he didn't love me. He loved the leverage." Daniel leaned back thoughtful. "Takes guts to walk away." It didn't feel brave, she admitted. It felt like drowning. He looked at her, then really looked and said, "You made it out. That's what matters." She didn't say anything. She just looked back. And for the first time since the knock at 2 a.m., she thought maybe this wasn't the end of something. Maybe it was the beginning. Saturday morning broke with the sound of a dripping faucet and the faint hum of cartoons echoing down the hallway. Isabel stood barefoot in the kitchen, twisting open a stubborn jar of strawberry jam while toast popped from the toaster behind her. Her hair was damp from a shower, her sleeves rolled to her elbows. She didn't look like a woman who once held meetings with Wall Street bankers. She looked normal. And for the first time, she liked that reflection. Lily sat at the small table, coloring tongue sticking out in concentration. "Can you help me spell believe?" she asked without looking up. Isabel smiled, walked over, and spelled it letter by letter as the little girl wrote. "You're smart," Lily declared, "like Miss Megan at school, but prettier." Daniel, who had just walked in, raised an eyebrow. "Careful, kid. You're inflating her ego." Isabel laughed, handing him a coffee mug. "Don't worry, it's been deflated plenty." He took the mug and sipped. "You sleep okay, I did. For once." Their eyes met. Something lingered there, muted affection, maybe even a question neither of them dared voice. Isabel looked away first. Daniel nodded toward the table. "You're good with her. She makes it easy. She doesn't usually trust people fast." "Neither do I," Isabel said. "But she's got that light. You know." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I know." That afternoon, while Lily napped, Daniel asked if Isabel wanted to walk with him to the neighborhood center where he volunteered sometimes. It was a small brick building with peeling paint, but a warm heart. On weekends, it hosted food drives and coat collections. Isabel slipped on Lily's spare beanie. It was purple and too small, and followed him. Inside, volunteers were stacking donated blankets. A woman with silver hair and bright eyes greeted Daniel with a hug. "Didn't think I'd see you today, Han," she said. "Needed to drop off some boxes." Daniel replied, then turned. "This is Belle. She's staying with us for a little while." The woman smiled. "Any friend of Daniel's is a friend of mine. I'm Marjorie." Isabel shook her hand. It was warm and firm. Marjorie leaned in and whispered, "You're the first woman he's brought here in 5 years." Isabel blinked. "Oh no, it's not like that. I'm just what Marjorie asked gently. I'm not sure yet." Marjorie nodded knowingly. That's often where the best stories start. On the walk home, Daniel asked, "You okay? I like her," Isabel said. "She likes you too. That's rare. Marjorie's got a sixth sense for people who are full of it." "I used to be full of it," Isabel said with a half smile. He looked at her. "But you're not now." They passed a bus stop and Isabel slowed. Her hand grazed the cold metal bench. For a moment she looked like she might sit down, like she might go. Daniel stopped a few steps ahead. "You thinking of leaving?" She hesitated. "I'm thinking of what happens when I do." He nodded. "Want the truth?" "Always. I'll miss having someone in the kitchen who doesn't burn toast." She laughed, breath fogging in the cold. "But more than that," he said, quieter now. "Lily, she's opening up in ways I haven't seen in a long time, and that's because of you." Isabel blinked hard. "I don't want to hurt her." "Then don't. Simple. No pressure. Just honesty. The kind of truth you couldn't buy in Manhattan." That evening, Daniel pulled out an old photo album. They sat on the floor while Lily curled against Isabel's side, half asleep. "She looks like her mom," Isabel said softly, pointing to a photo of a young woman with a wide smile and tired eyes. "Yeah," Daniel replied, voice low. April passed when Lily was just a baby. Complications from an undiagnosed heart condition. "I'm sorry. So was I." He flipped the page. "I was building my career then. Had offers lined up, promotions coming. But after April, I couldn't leave Lily with strangers. So I took local jobs, maintenance, plumbing, some HVAC gigs. Never went back to the office world." Isabel looked at him. "You gave all that up for her. I didn't see it that way," he said. "I just saw a baby who didn't have a mom, and I thought she's not going to lose both parents to ambition." Isabel swallowed. "You're not what I expected. Neither are you." They sat in silence, the kind of silence that didn't need filling. Outside, the snow fell again, silent and slow, as if the world were cushioning them just for tonight. Later, after Lily had gone to bed, Isabel lingered in the kitchen, staring at the small light on the stove. Daniel walked in, drying his hands. "I should tell you something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He leaned against the doorway. "Okay, I wasn't just running from a wedding. I was running from a version of myself I didn't recognize anymore. one that smiled in photos and made decisions for shareholders and stood beside a man who didn't even ask how I liked my coffee. Daniel crossed the room slowly. "And how do you like your coffee?" She looked up, eyes glassy, with a little cream and something true to believe in. Daniel reached past her and poured 2 cups. Then, "Let's start there." She took the cup, her fingers brushing his. The heat of the mug seeped into her palms, but it wasn't the only warmth that settled in her chest. And in that kitchen with nothing more than mismatched mugs and flickering lights, Isabel felt something solid for the first time in years. Not a promise, but maybe the beginning of one. The sun filtered through gauzy curtains, painting long golden streaks across the floorboards. Isabel stood at the window with a cup of lukewarm coffee, watching Lily run circles around a pile of snow in the front yard. Her laughter rang out like wind chimes, bright and unpredictable, filling the cold morning air with something alive. Inside, the house felt heavier. Not in a bad way, just in a way that suggested something was changing. Isabel didn't know exactly when the guilt started creeping in, perhaps somewhere between Lily handing her a crayon-scribbled drawing of the 3 of them holding hands and Daniel pouring her a second cup of coffee with the familiarity of someone who'd known her longer than a week. She felt like a trespasser in a life that wasn't hers, yet everything in it made her want to stay. Daniel walked in from the hallway, towel over one shoulder, hair damp from the shower. "I'm heading into town this afternoon," he said casually. "Just a short job replacing a water heater." She nodded. "You'll be okay with Lily for a bit." "Of course," Isabel said. "She and I have big plans, blanket fort story hour, maybe a tea party if you're lucky." He chuckled. "Just don't let her paint your nails. You'll never get that glitter off." Their eyes locked for a beat longer than necessary. Then he said softly, "I trust you." It landed heavier than she expected. 3 simple words, but they carried weight. She smiled, but it was tight. "Thanks," she said, turning back toward the window to hide her unease. That afternoon, while Lily napped in a cocoon of stuffed animals, Isabel wandered into the living room. She wasn't snooping, not really, but a folder on the dining table had caught her eye, the one she'd helped him reorganize. It was still open, Daniel's rough handwriting scattered in the margins. She flipped through it slowly. Neat revisions. A cover letter she hadn't seen before, addressed to the district school board. Her heart warmed at the thought of Lily thriving in a school that saw her potential. And Daniel, this man who had once designed systems for high-rise buildings, now writing essays about playground safety and after-school programs. He had quietly repurposed his brilliance into something real, something for someone else. Her fingers paused over a page that still bore her own faint notes in red ink. She should feel proud. Instead, she felt like she was slipping, becoming attached, becoming someone who belonged here. And that was dangerous. Because she didn't. Because, later that night, after Lily had fallen asleep watching Finding Nemo, Isabel found herself curled on the couch next to Daniel. The movie menu hummed quietly on the screen, casting soft blue light across the room. Neither of them moved to turn it off. Daniel leaned back, one hand cradling a mug, the other resting casually along the back of the couch. "You don't talk much about where you came from," he said gently. Isabel didn't answer right away. She stared down at her knees, fingers twisting the edge of the blanket in her lap. "I used to think I had everything," she said. "A corner office, a closet full of designer clothes, invitations to every gala and fundraiser. But none of it meant anything if I had to keep pretending I was someone else to earn it." Daniel nodded, not interrupting. "I worked for years to climb out of the shadow of my father's name," she went on. "And then I met Andrew, polished, charming, connected. He made me feel like I'd finally arrived, until I realized he didn't love me. He loved the idea of what marrying me would get him." Daniel's jaw tightened. "So I ran," she finished. "Not because I was brave, because if I didn't, I would have lost myself completely." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "You ever think about going back?" he asked. "To that life," she said. "No, not even for a second. but I do think about how I'm going to face the world when it eventually finds me again." He shifted, leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You want my advice?" She looked at him surprised. He smiled faintly. "Probably not. But I'll give it anyway." "Go on," she said. "People will always try to define you by your worst moment or your biggest one. Doesn't mean they're right. You get to decide who you are now, starting from wherever you are, even if that's a couch in a messy house with a kid who draws flying lions." A soft laugh escaped her throat, small but real. "You make it sound simple." "It's not," he said, "but it is worth it." She let that sit between them. It was the kind of thing her past self would have written off as quaint. But here in this house with peeling baseboards and the smell of old books, it felt truer than anything marble floors or panoramic views had ever given her. Later, when she walked past Lily's room to check on her, she found a drawing taped to the inside of the door. It was stick figures again, 3 of them. Lily in the middle, grinning, Daniel on one side, and Isabel on the other, wearing a crown and holding a steaming cup of coffee. Above their heads in crayon letters were 3 words, "My Happy Home." Isabel stared at it for a long time. She wanted to belong to that picture more than she could admit. But in the distance in the city she'd escaped, her face was still on newspapers. Gossip blogs, corporate whispers. She hadn't just run away from a man, she'd run away from an empire, and eventually someone would come looking. She reached up, gently touched the corner of the drawing with her fingertips, then turned off the hallway light. In her chest, hope and dread wrestled in silence. And for the first time, Isabel didn't know which one would win. The storm came in the middle of the night, not one of snow or wind, but of memory. Isabel sat upright in the guest room, drenched in cold sweat. Her breath came short fast. The nightmare still clung to her skin, flashes of camera lights, Andrew's face at the altar turning stone cold her name. Isabel LaRue, echoing across news broadcasts, dissected, sold, spun. She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to steady the pounding rhythm beneath her ribs. The house was quiet, but her thoughts weren't. They spun, spiraled. She couldn't sleep, not now. Instead, she wrapped herself in a blanket and crept into the living room. She didn't expect to find Daniel already there, sitting on the edge of the couch, a mug of coffee in one hand, eyes dark with thought. He didn't flinch when he saw her. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, voice low, almost a whisper. She shook her head and sat beside him. He handed her his mug without a word. She accepted it. For a few moments they just listened to the house settle. Pipes groaned, wind brushed against the windows, and somewhere in the walls the heater hummed to life. Finally, Isabel said, "Do you ever feel like the moment you start to feel safe, something's going to take it away?" Daniel didn't answer right away. "Then I used to." "What changed?" He looked at her. "I stopped waiting to lose things. Started trying to build them." She stared down at the mug. "What if you build something and someone from the past shows up to knock it down?" Daniel exhaled slowly, like he already knew what she wasn't saying. "Isabel," he said quietly. The first time he'd used her full name. "You know the world doesn't just forget someone like you. Not forever." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The next morning was a Sunday. Crisp and silent. Lily danced around the kitchen in mismatched socks, begging for blueberry pancakes. Isabel tried to keep her hands from shaking as she poured batter into the pan. She had made up her mind last night. She would tell Daniel the truth, everything. She owed him that. She owed Lily that. But fate has a cruel sense of timing. Because the knock came before the confession. 3 sharp raps at the front door. Not panicked, not desperate. Just firm. Daniel, drying a dish, glanced toward the sound, expecting anyone he asked. She froze, spatula mid-air. Her stomach dropped. He narrowed his eyes. Bell. She didn't move. Another knock. Stronger. Daniel went to the door and pulled it open halfway, his body blocking the threshold. A man in a charcoal suit stood there, tall and calm, with frost still clinging to his shoulders. "Good morning," the man said smoothly. I'm looking for Isabel LaRue. Daniel's spine straightened. Who's asking Jonathan Lake? The man replied, slipping out a sleek leather wallet and flashing a private security badge. I work for Harrington Global. Miss LaRue's safety is of paramount concern to us. Daniel said nothing. His jaw was locked. Isabel stepped into view. Jonathan gave her a small nod. There you are. We've been looking for you. Are you all right? Her mouth was dry. I'm fine. Your disappearance caused considerable alarm. The media is ravenous. I didn't disappear, she said, voice steady. I walked away. Jonathan's smile didn't reach his eyes. Andrew's been very concerned. He's prepared to offer a private settlement. He simply wants a final statement clearing his name, and then you'll be free to move on however you like. Isabel blinked. So this was it. Not a rescue. A cleanup. A transaction. Daniel glanced between them. This man bothering you? No, she said quietly. But he's not here for me. He's here for the version of me they can package and silence. Jonathan's smile faltered. I'm not going back, she said louder now. I'm not signing anything. Tell Andrew he can keep his empire. I want my name back. Very well, Jonathan said after a pause. We'll proceed accordingly, but I assure you the press will find you soon enough. He turned, descended the steps, and disappeared down the sidewalk like he hadn't just split the air wide open. The door closed. Silence. Daniel stood still. Then he turned to her. So, he said, voice controlled. You're Isabel LaRue. She nodded. You're the woman who walked away from a $100 million empire and let the world think you'd been kidnapped. Yes. You stayed here, he continued, voice low, in my home, with my daughter, and you never told me who you were. I wanted to, she said, eyes stinging. I didn't know how. Every time I tried, it felt like saying it out loud would break something. You should have let it, he snapped. Before Lily drew pictures of you with a crown and started calling you family. That one hurt. I'm still me, she whispered. Daniel stared at her eyes filled with something deeper than anger betrayal. I let you into our lives, he said. I let Lily believe you were staying. And he broke off, running a hand through his hair. Isabel stepped forward. Please don't shut me out. He shook his head. I need space. She flinched. Daniel softened just a fraction. Not forever, just until I figure out whether the woman I let in is still standing here. That night, Isabel packed her things. She folded Lily's drawings carefully into her coat pocket. She didn't cry, she couldn't. There was a strange stillness in her chest now, as if the worst had already passed and left her hollow. She didn't leave a note. She just opened the front door, stepped into the falling snow, and closed it gently behind her. The porch light stayed on. But for the first time, it didn't feel like it was meant for her. The motel room was small, tired-looking, and smelled faintly of bleach and stale coffee. Isabel sat on the edge of the stiff bed, wrapped in a blanket not meant to comfort. The television flickered soundlessly in the corner, a muted infomercial hawking miracle knives. She wasn't watching. Her phone vibrated again. 17 missed calls. 3 from Jonathan Lake. 4 from former colleagues. 1 from her mother. The rest from unknown numbers. She hadn't listened to a single voicemail. The headlines were everywhere. Now runaway CEO finally found in small-town outskirts. Isabel LaRue refuses statement. What is she hiding? Harrington demands answers after public embarrassment. They made her sound like a scandal, not a person. And somehow the only silence she couldn't bear was Daniel's. He hadn't called. Not even once. 3 days passed. 3 long, paper-thin days in which Isabel drifted between motel coffee and hollow sleep, each moment heavier than the last. She found herself scrolling through old photos, not of Andrew, not of Gala's, but of Lily's drawings. She'd taken pictures before she left. Drawings of stars and flying lions, and the one that gutted her most, the 3 of them under a bright yellow sun labeled, My Happy Home. She told herself she had done the right thing, that Daniel deserved honesty, that she had finally faced the truth about her life. So why did everything feel worse than when she was hiding? On the fourth morning, she visited the local pharmacy for cough syrup. Her throat had tightened from stress or guilt, or both. She wore sunglasses and a hoodie, but a woman near the checkout counter still paused and whispered to her friend, "Isn't that the one who Isabel left without buying anything?" That night, she sat by the window and watched the snow fall thinner now, almost gentle. Her phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't a missed call. It was a message, from a number she didn't recognize, but her breath caught when she saw the name. Marjorie. "I don't know what happened, sweetheart, but Daniel's quieter than I've seen him in years, and Lily hasn't colored anything in 3 days. If you ever felt like you mattered here, it's because you do. Come home." Isabel stared at the screen. Her chest cracked just a little. Come home. The next morning, she boarded a local bus headed back toward the neighborhood she had tried to forget for their sake. Not her own. She wasn't sure if Daniel would even open the door. She just knew she had to try. She stepped off the bus mid-afternoon. The snow had mostly melted, leaving behind gray slush and puddles. The house looked the same modest quiet with the crooked drawing still taped inside the front window. Isabel approached slowly, her breath shallow. The porch light was off. That alone almost stopped her. But then she heard laughter from around the side of the house. She followed the sound and found them in the backyard. Daniel was crouched beside Lily, fixing the chain on her small pink bicycle. His hands were greasy. Lily was covered in sidewalk chalk. For a moment, Isabel just watched them. Daniel looked tired. Lily looked like something was missing. Then Lily spotted her. She froze. Belle, her voice cracked. Daniel looked up. Time stilled. Isabel stepped forward, unsure if she was breathing. "Hi, Lily." The little girl ran to her without hesitation and threw her arms around her waist. "You left," she whispered. "You didn't say goodbye?" "I'm sorry, sweetheart," Isabel said, her voice catching. "I didn't know how." Daniel stood wiping his hands on a rag. He didn't speak. Isabel met his gaze. "Can I talk to you?" He nodded, once curt, and gestured toward the porch. Inside, he poured 2 mugs of tea, just like he always had. She took hers without a word, her hands trembling slightly. "I didn't leave to run away," she began. "I left to protect something." "You left without saying a word." Daniel replied, his voice even, but tired. "That's not protection. That's abandonment." She swallowed hard. "You're right. I was scared. Not of the media. Not even of Andrew. I was scared of how much I cared about being here." He looked at her. "You think that excuse is lying?" "No," she said. "But I wasn't lying when I read Lily bedtime stories, or when I cleaned your kitchen, or when I helped with that application. None of that was fake." Daniel sat back, arms crossed. "I didn't expect to find anything real when I knocked on your door," Isabel continued. "But I did. I found a little girl who reminded me what love felt like. I found a man who sees people not their titles. I found home." He didn't respond right away. Finally, he said, "Lily cried when you left. She asked if she'd done something wrong." Isabel flinched. "God, no. She's the only thing that made me feel right." Daniel's voice softened. "So what now? You tell the world who you are and then vanish again when it gets hard?" "No," she said, steady now. "I've made arrangements. I'm stepping down from the company permanently. Selling my shares, donating most of the proceeds to a housing initiative. Quietly. Legally. Permanently. I'm not going back to that world. I've already started dissolving it." He blinked, surprised. "I'm not asking you to forgive me right away," she said. "I'm just asking you to believe that I'm choosing you on purpose. And if you let me, I'd like to earn my way back." A long silence. Then Daniel sighed and stood. Isabel's heart sank. But instead of walking away, he held out his hand. "I'm not good at second chances," he said. "But I believe in first truths." She took his hand. And this time when their fingers touched it felt like the beginning of something that had been waiting all along. A kind of peace that didn't come from hiding, but from finally being seen. The days that followed didn't feel like repair. They felt like quiet rebuilding. Like stepping into a house after a storm and not picking up the pieces all at once, but gently, room by room, with reverence for what had broken and what was worth saving. Isabel stayed, but not as a guest anymore. She took the laundry down before Daniel could. She packed Lily's school lunches, learned how she liked her carrot sticks arranged, and that peanut butter had to be smooth, not chunky. She brewed Daniel's coffee exactly the way he liked it, with just a dash of cinnamon, though he'd never asked. In return, he cleared a drawer for her things. He didn't say much, but the gesture was louder than any apology. Lily started drawing again. The first picture was a flying house with Belle on the roof and Daniel at the wheel. Lily was in the window arms flung wide in joy. She taped it to the fridge without a word, as if the silence itself sealed something sacred. One evening, as twilight painted the neighborhood in soft purples and amber, Isabel sat on the porch steps while Daniel worked quietly on the front yard heater. Lily was at a sleepover, her laughter no longer echoing from the house. Isabel wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, unsure whether it was to ward off the chill or the quiet. She watched Daniel from the corner of her eye. His sleeves were rolled up forearms flecked with dust, a pencil tucked behind one ear. "How did you learn to do all this?" she asked. He didn't look up. "My dad was a fix-it-all kind of guy. Taught me more with a wrench than I ever learned in college. Did you always want to be an engineer?" "Not really," he said. "I wanted to be a writer, but I was good at math and writing didn't pay the bills." "You're still a builder," she said softly. He paused, glanced at her. She continued, "You build safe spaces. Not just heaters and stair rails. You built a world Lily could trust. You built a space I could fall into without breaking." Daniel sat back, wiping his hands on a rag. "I wasn't always good at it." "No one is," she said. "But you did it anyway. That counts." He looked at her long and searching. The kind of look that didn't scan appearances but sought truths beneath them. "I'm not scared anymore," she added. "Of what? Of being known. Of not being who people want me to be." He nodded slowly. "That's a hard fear to beat." "I didn't beat it," she said. "You helped me carry it until I could set it down." Daniel stood, tossed the rag over his shoulder, and walked toward her. "I never asked what happened after," he said. "After you left." "What did you do?" "I went back to the firm." "Quietly." "I sat across from a boardroom full of men in cufflinks and said, 'You can have the company, the tower, the legacy. I don't want it.' I signed it all away except a small fund I kept for something better." He raised a brow. "Better. I want to build something like this," she said. "Real places. Affordable housing. Safe spaces for single parents, foster kids, anyone who just needs a door to knock on at 2 a.m. and be let in without question." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You'll do it." "I believe that." "Will you help me?" she asked, voice quiet. He didn't answer with words. Instead, he stepped forward, reached out, and pulled her gently to her feet. And then he did something he hadn't done since she returned. He hugged her, not as a friend, not as a stranger learning to trust again, but as a man who had waited for the truth and found it was exactly what his heart had hoped. Her arms folded around him, and they stood there wrapped in each other beneath the porch light she had once stood beneath, shivering alone. This time she was warm. Inside the house was dim but alive. The heater hummed. The clock ticked softly, and the scent of cinnamon from an earlier baked pie still lingered in the air. Daniel poured them each a cup of tea, and they sat at the kitchen table as the world settled around them. "I never told you," she said, stirring hers, "about the first night I saw you." "You mean when you knocked on my door?" "No," she said. "Earlier. Before the knock. I saw the porch light flicker on through the trees. I was cold, hurting, didn't know where I was. And then I saw it. A warm light, steady, not too bright, not too loud. Just enough to say, 'Come closer if you need something.'" He leaned back. That old porch light. It felt like hope. He chuckled, shaking his head. It flickers half the time. I've meant to replace it for years, don't she said. Not yet. It brought me home. Before bed, Isabel peeked into Lily's room out of habit. Though the girl wasn't home, the scent of her lavender shampoo lingered. On her nightstand was a picture she hadn't seen before a Polaroid Isabel hadn't known was taken. It was of the three of them. She was laughing, head tilted back, Daniel looking at her with an expression so gentle it hurt. Lily was in the middle, eyes lit up. Scrawled beneath it in Lily's handwriting, "This is where magic lives." Isabel touched the photo with her fingertips, then closed the door gently. Downstairs, Daniel was turning off lights. She joined him, brushing her hand against his. He didn't flinch. They walked together through the quiet, turning off one lamp at a time until only the porch light remained. Neither of them turned it off, and outside in the quiet of a town that never made headlines, hope kept flickering softly just enough to be seen. It started with a knock. But not like before. This one came in the late afternoon with sunlight slanting through the windows and the smell of baked apples curling from the oven. Isabel was tying Lily's shoes on the living room floor while Daniel adjusted the thermostat near the hallway. Everything felt ordinary, quiet, whole. The knock broke it not violently but firmly, a reminder that the world didn't disappear just because they'd built a safe corner within it. Daniel answered the door with a practiced calm. Isabel rose slowly, heart already fluttering. It wasn't Jonathan this time. It wasn't Andrew or a reporter. It was a woman in a tailored gray blazer and patent leather heels, flanked by a younger man carrying a digital tablet. "Ms. LaRue," the woman said. "My name is Caroline Niven. I represent a consortium of investors who were very surprised when you stepped away from LaRue Holdings." Isabel blinked. "How did you find me?" Caroline offered a placid smile. "We have resources, and a very expensive reason to care where you've gone." Daniel stepped forward slightly. "She's not interested. Whatever it is she's done." Caroline barely looked at him. "I'm here to offer Ms. LaRue a new opportunity, one that makes sense for her talents, her vision, and her name." The younger man opened his tablet, spinning it toward Isabel. A presentation flickered to life. Renderings of modern housing complexes, digital dashboards showing funding projections, headlines reading LaRue Urban Renewal Project. "Affordable housing," Caroline said as if she were unveiling a yacht, powered by sustainable materials, data-driven community development. "We want to brand it with you. You could lead from wherever you like." Isabel stared at the tablet, then at Caroline. "You want me to come back," she said, but quieter. "Palatable. Sellable." "We want to help you make an impact at scale," Caroline said smoothly. "You already have a cause. Now you have an audience. Let us amplify it." Daniel didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Isabel handed the tablet back. "Thank you," she said. "But no." Caroline's mask cracked. "You haven't even heard the financials. That's the part I'm least interested in." The younger man looked stunned. Caroline blinked slowly, recalibrating. "You're walking away from millions." "I've already walked away from billions," Isabel replied, voice steady. "I'm not here to be a symbol or a pitch deck. I'm here to do something that matters." She glanced at Daniel. "And I don't need a boardroom to prove that." Caroline pursed her lips, nodded curtly, and turned to leave. As the door clicked shut, Daniel exhaled. "You meant that he asked?" She turned to him. Every word. He crossed his arms, thoughtful. "So, what now?" Isabel smiled. "We build something real. From the ground up. The right way. No headlines. No PR firm. Just us." 2 weeks later, they held the first planning meeting at the community center. Marjorie made coffee and insisted on name tags even though everyone already knew one another. Daniel stood by a whiteboard with blueprints. Isabel sat cross-legged on a folding chair beside a veteran school principal, a retired city planner, and 2 single moms juggling toddlers. There were no suits, no assistants, just people who had lived through hard things and wanted to help others survive them. This, Isabel whispered to Daniel between comments, is what the world needs more of. People. People who remember what it's like to need a second chance and want to be the reason someone else gets one. Daniel smiled almost shyly. You've changed. She tilted her head. Maybe. Or maybe I just remembered who I was before I got lost. The first project was modest, restoring a long-abandoned house into transitional housing for women leaving domestic violence shelters. Isabel used a portion of the trust she'd kept not to control, but to launch. The rest came from Grant's volunteers and Daniel's long list of former clients who owed him favors and remembered his quiet reliability. He worked on the roof himself. Isabel painted walls alongside a mother of 3. Lily handed out lemonade from the front steps wearing a plastic hard hat. They called it the North Light Project after the porch light that had first welcomed Isabel in from the snow. One evening, after days of drywall and dust, Daniel found Isabel alone in the nearly finished house. She stood in what would be the kitchen, her hands on the edge of the counter, staring at the space as if she could already hear laughter filling it. He stepped behind her arms, folded, thinking of moving in. She smiled, just imagining what it'll feel like when someone walks through that door scared out of their mind, and realizes they're safe now. He leaned on the opposite counter. You gave up a lot to do this. I didn't give anything up, she said. I traded up. He chuckled. You know, when I first opened my door that night, I thought you were going to collapse. I almost did, she said. But you didn't let me. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out something folded. It was one of Lily's drawings, creased and a little faded. Found this behind the bookshelf when we moved it, he said. Thought maybe you'd want it. She opened it carefully. It was the original, the 3 of them beneath the yellow sun labeled My Happy Home. She stared at it for a long moment. Then gently she tucked it into her jacket pocket. You know, she said, voice softer now. For all the millions I was offered, this is still the most valuable thing I've ever been handed. Daniel stepped forward, brushing his hand along hers. That's because it can't be bought. Their fingers laced slowly, effortlessly. And as the sun dipped outside the newly painted window, the house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like the first place in a long time where something sacred had taken root. Not an empire, not a brand, but a life. One built not on power or legacy, but on love, and the unshakable worth of being truly seen. The house glowed softly beneath the early evening sky. Fresh coats of white paint shone clean and welcoming, and flower beds newly planted hugged the foundation like gentle hands. In the backyard, Lily ran in clumsy zigzags, chasing after a kite Daniel had helped her build its tail, fluttering like ribbons of freedom. Isabel stood on the porch, brushing dust from her jeans, a clipboard in one hand. Her hair was tied back, cheeks flushed with the effort of real work and real purpose. But her eyes, their light came from somewhere deeper, somewhere settled. Tomorrow was opening day. The first family would arrive, a young mother with a toddler and nowhere else to go. Isabel had memorized their names. She'd placed a book on the nightstand, folded fresh sheets, lit a small candle in the entryway that smelled like citrus and hope. Marjorie had insisted on hanging a sign over the door. The North Light Project. A home, not a handout. Isabel had cried when she saw it. That night, as they packed away the final tools, Daniel found her standing barefoot in the middle of the main room. You okay? He asked. She nodded slowly. I was just thinking about the first night I stepped into your house. How I felt so small, so lost. He didn't speak, just listened. And now she continued. I feel like I've built something that helps others not feel that way. Maybe that's how we know we've healed, when our scars become someone else's shelter. Daniel stepped beside her. You didn't just build a shelter, Belle. You built a way out. That matters. I couldn't have done it without you. He turned to her, his voice lower. You didn't need me to do it. But I'm glad you let me walk beside you while you did. She looked at him. Really looked. The man who had opened his door to a stranger in a torn designer dress whose daughter had colored her way into Isabel's heart, whose quiet steadiness had become the only thing that made her believe again. Her voice came softer now. "I wasn't planning to fall in love with you." Daniel held her gaze. "I wasn't planning to be someone you could fall in love with." A beat passed. Then Isabel reached for his hand and said, "Let's stop planning." The next morning was crisp, full of promise. Volunteers bustled about, setting up refreshments in the yard. The town's mayor showed up with a ribbon and oversized scissors. The local news came small cameras and big hearts. Daniel gave a quiet interview. Isabel declined the spotlight, letting the project speak for itself. But the true moment, the one no camera caught, happened hours later when all the guests had gone and the sun had begun to lower itself gently across the rooftops. A small blue sedan pulled up to the curb. A woman stepped out clutching a diaper bag. She looked young, tired, and unsure. Her child, no more than 2, clung to her leg. Isabel walked out alone, leaving the others inside. "Hi," she said softly. "You must be Jordan." The woman nodded, eyes darting with uncertainty. Isabel smiled gently. "This is your space now. Come see it." She guided her through the front door, pointing to the basket of toiletries, the stocked mini-fridge, the crib tucked neatly in the corner. Jordan didn't say much, but when she sank into the edge of the bed and her child curled beside her, the relief that washed over her face said everything. Isabel stepped out to give her privacy. Daniel was standing in the hallway watching. She didn't say, "Thank you," Isabel murmured. Not disappointed, just noticing. "She doesn't have to," he replied. She came. That was her way of saying yes. Later that night, back at Daniel's house, the 3 of them sat on the floor building a puzzle. Lily pointed to one corner piece. "Is this the edge?" she asked. "Yeah," Isabel said, smiling. "It's where things start to make sense." Lily yawned mid-puzzle and curled up against Isabel's side. Daniel glanced at the clock. "She's out cold. I'll carry her up." He watched Isabel gently lift Lily into her arms, her movement instinctive, graceful. As she climbed the stairs, Daniel remained on the floor, staring at the incomplete puzzle. One piece rested near his knee. When Isabel returned, he picked it up and handed it to her. "Last piece," he said. She placed it in the center. They both stared at it for a moment. Then she said quietly, "I never wanted to be rescued." "I know. But I wanted someone who wouldn't walk away." "I didn't." She turned to him. "And I won't," she added. Daniel leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. The moment pulsed between them, quiet and full. No rush, no fireworks, just something solid, something chosen. A week later, Isabel received a letter. It was hand-delivered. The seal was familiar. She opened it slowly, expecting some last-ditch plea from the company or worse, legal maneuvering. But it wasn't from Andrew. It was from a woman named Teresa, a former janitor at LaRue Holdings. Someone Isabel had only vaguely remembered. Ms. LaRue. "I don't know if you remember me. You probably don't. I was the one cleaning the conference floor every night after the board left. I saw you stay late. I saw you cry once in the hallway. I wanted to tell you then, but I didn't know how. You don't have to save the world all at once. You just have to light one room at a time. You lit mine even when you didn't know it. Thank you." Isabel folded the letter and pressed it to her chest. She didn't cry. She just breathed in deeply, quietly. And in that breath was everything she had once feared she'd lost: her name, her purpose, her place. That evening, someone knocked at the door again. This time it was Lily. She had a new drawing. 3 people again, holding hands, but this time under a house with lights in every window. Above it, in bright purple marker, "Sometimes you knock on a door and someone knocks back." Isabel looked at Daniel, and he whispered, smiling, "Welcome home." The town was quiet that night, hushed by early spring rain and the kind of dusk that made everything porch steps, garden beds. Familiar faces look softer, almost holy. The air smelled like fresh soil and lavender soap. Inside Daniel's house, laughter drifted from the kitchen, low and rich like a song remembered. Isabel wiped her hands on a towel, having just pulled the last tray of muffins from the oven. She wasn't dressed like a woman who used to dominate boardrooms. She wore jeans fraying at the edges and a sweater Daniel insisted was his, though it now lived permanently draped over her shoulders. Her hair was half pulled up her cheeks, flushed with heat and happiness. Daniel stood beside her, filling mugs with tea. And Lily, who had been supervising the baking process, lay on the floor surrounded by markers and sticky notes, carefully labeling each muffin as approved by Lily the expert. They had fallen into this rhythm quietly. No big declarations. No carefully constructed timelines. Just one choice after another, simple, clear, true. Home didn't come all at once, but it had come. After dinner, they walked together to the North Lighthouse. The rain had eased to a mist, and the path glistened under street lamps like a thread guiding them forward. The house stood proudly now, not just because it was structurally sound, but because it breathed. Kids' bicycles leaned against the porch. Curtains fluttered in lit windows. Someone inside was playing an old guitar. A baby's cry rang out from an open window, followed by soft coos and the quiet lull of someone singing. Isabel and Daniel stopped at the edge of the sidewalk, Lily swinging between their clasped hands. "This is the 5th family now," Isabel said, "and we have 3 more applications on the way." Daniel nodded. "They're calling you the porch light builder." She smiled. "I kind of like that. It fits." They stood in the glow for a moment longer. Then Lily tugged their hands. "Can we go inside?" Isabel kneeled beside her. "Not tonight, sweetheart. Tonight is their night." Lily pouted. "But I helped paint the bookshelf." Daniel leaned down. "And we'll come by tomorrow so you can see your masterpiece. Right now, they're building their first memory here. They need to make it their own." Lily nodded solemnly. "Okay, memories need space to breathe." Isabel looked at Daniel, eyebrows raised. "Where does she get this wisdom?" He grinned. "Cartoons. And maybe Marjorie." Back at home, Lily went to bed early, worn out from a day of CEO-level planning, as she called it. Daniel turned off the lights one by one, and Isabel settled onto the couch, cradling a mug of cocoa. A soft knock came at the door. When Daniel opened it, Marjorie stood there holding a small framed photograph. "I found this in an old folder from the shelter days," she said, handing it over. "Thought you two should have it." Isabel took the frame. Inside was a photo, grainy and imperfect, taken from a community center wall years ago. A much younger Daniel standing beside a heater he'd just installed. A paper sign taped to the wall behind him read, "Heat for the ones still healing." Below it, someone had scribbled, "Don't forget the power of warmth, literal and otherwise." Daniel's throat worked as he stared at it. Isabel brushed her fingers along the glass. "Thank you," she said softly. Marjorie smiled, eyes shining. "You two are the real thing. Not the fancy kind, not the flashy kind. The kind people actually remember." Later that night, with rain pattering gently on the roof, Daniel found Isabel curled on the porch swing, wrapped in his sweater, staring at the old light overhead. It still flickered, slightly stubborn as ever. "You never did replace it," she said as he sat beside her. He shrugged. "It works, even when it wobbles." She rested her head against his shoulder. "I used to think love had to be grand to be real," she murmured. Lavish proposals, dramatic moments, fireworks. And now she turned her face up to his. "Now I think it's this. A kid asleep upstairs. A light that flickers but doesn't go out. A man who makes room beside him even after all the doors I've closed." Daniel brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "It's real. All of it." She pulled a small slip of paper from her pocket and handed it to him. He unfolded it. It was Lily's latest drawing, slightly better proportioned stick figures this time, under a banner that read, "This is what forever looks like." Daniel didn't speak. He didn't need to. He just reached for her hand and held it as the porch light hummed above them. In the quiet that followed, Isabel closed her eyes and breathed it in. Not the past, not the pressure, not the name she had once thought defined her. But this moment, the warm, steady heartbeat of a life chosen deliberately. She had knocked on a stranger's door once at 2 a.m., cold, scared, and unsure she belonged anywhere. Now she didn't just belong. She lit the light. She kept it on. For herself. For Lily. For anyone who still believed in second chances. And in the house behind her, a small girl stirred in her sleep and whispered through a dream. Sometimes you don't need a map, just a porch light that stays on. And Isabel smiled, because she knew this one always would. The storm had rolled in early that night, black clouds dragging across Manhattan like old bruises. Inside his glass-walled office on the 27th floor, Harold Campiano sat alone, swirling a deep amber scotch in his crystal tumbler. Behind him, the city blinked with rain-smeared light. In front of him, muted on a large monitor, a live security feed played quietly the dining floor of a Campiano's restaurant in Brooklyn. He hadn't meant to watch it. He never did anymore. But habit, or maybe something darker, always brought him back to these grainy windows into the lives he once built. Campiano's had become an empire, 12 restaurants in New York, 2 in Chicago, 1 in San Francisco. It should have been enough, but nothing ever filled the hole she left behind. The footage flickered, then steadied. A young waitress crossed the screen, weaving through tables with a practiced grace. Her dark brown hair was tied up in a loose knot held by a gleaming clip that shimmered like pearl under the dining room lights. Something about her gait, about the way she paused to check on a table of elderly women with gentleness, it caught his breath for just a moment. Harold leaned forward. He knew he was being foolish. Over the past 25 years, he'd seen her 100 times at a crosswalk in a subway in the reflection of his glass of wine. Always a stranger. Always not her. But this girl there was something painfully familiar in the curve of her jaw and the shape of her shoulders. Then it happened. A man in a suit at table 12 stood up too quickly. He was flushed drunk, waving his hand in frustration. The girl, the waitress, apologized, bowing slightly, trying to explain something. The wine glass on his table wobbled, then tipped. Red spread like blood across white linen. The man's voice rose audible even through the mic filters. "Are you deaf or just stupid?" Harold tensed. The girl stood, frozen eyes wide but silent, and then she turned to walk away. That's when he saw it. As she tucked her hair behind her ear, her neck turned toward the camera, exposing a small distinct birthmark shaped like a teardrop just below her left ear. Harold's hand went limp. The glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. Scotch spread across the polished wood like a stain of memory. He stood, slowly moving toward the desk drawer with mechanical precision. Inside lay an old velvet box. He opened it, revealing a photograph of a baby, swaddled in a hospital blanket, her tiny hand curled around a woman's thumb. The birthmark was there. Plain. Unmistakable. Beside the photo was a small silver clip, a pearl clasp that once held back a newborn's hair for her christening photo. It gleamed under the desk light identical to the one she had worn just seconds ago on the screen. Harold stumbled back into his chair. His hands shook as he reached for the intercom. "Jared," he said, voice low and tight. Sir, the head of corporate security, answered immediately. "I need a full background check on a waitress working at the Brooklyn Heights location. Her name, find her name. Cross-reference all hiring documents, employee files, anything." He didn't wait for a response. Back at Campiano's Brooklyn, Ella Reynolds stood motionless in the break room, blinking away tears. Her apron was stained with Merlot, her hands cold. It wasn't the first time a customer had raised his voice. But tonight, something cracked. It wasn't the insult. It was the exhaustion of pretending it didn't hurt. She turned the old clip in her hair absent-mindedly, a simple thing vintage and chipped at the edges. Her foster mother had given it to her on her 7th birthday, saying, "I found this with you when they brought you in. I always thought it was too fancy for an orphan." Ella never told anyone how often she stared at it, wondering where it came from. Who it came from? The break room door creaked open. A man in work boots and a blue button-down shirt stepped in, carefully holding a roll of electrical tape and a toolbox. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing strong forearms marked with grease. He had kind eyes. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. Ella quickly wiped her face. "Fine. It's just wine, not blood." He hesitated, then pulled a clean napkin from his back pocket and offered it. She took it silently. "You handled that pretty well," he said. "Some folks yell right back." She let out a hollow laugh. "Yeah, well, I need the job more than I need to be right." He gave a thoughtful nod. "I'm Jack. I handle maintenance for the Brooklyn and Tribeca branches." Ella. "Well," Ella Jack said, glancing toward the kitchen, "I think you've got more strength than you think." She looked at him, then really looked. He wasn't offering pity, just presence. A stillness she hadn't felt in a long time. From outside, a child's voice called. Dad Jack turned. "Be right there, sweetie." Ella watched as a little girl peeked into the doorway, freckles, pink sneakers, and a backpack nearly her size. "Sorry," Jack said sheepishly. "She does homework while I work late. Her name's Lily." Ella smiled, faintly warmed by something she couldn't explain. "Nice to meet you, Lily," she said softly. The girl beamed. "You're really pretty." "Are you gonna marry my dad?" Jack groaned. "Okay, that's enough matchmaking for one night." Lily giggled and disappeared again. Ella laughed a real one this time, and Jack looked relieved. Back in his office, Harold stared at the monitor. She was laughing now, carefree, radiant, and it hit him like a punch to the chest. He whispered to the empty room, "God help me." "Is that you, Isabel?" He hadn't said the name out loud in years, but the name tasted like sunlight and warm arms, like a promise broken and still waiting to be fulfilled. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. If this girl really was her, it would change everything. And if she wasn't, he'd lose her all over again. But this time, he wouldn't walk away. The smell of scorched wires lingered faintly in the air as Jack Miller knelt beneath the industrial stove at the Campiano's downtown location. The outlet had blown again, third time this month, and though it was a fire hazard, corporate refused to shut down operations during peak hours. So they called Jack. They always did. He didn't mind. Jack liked the quiet, like the hum of electricity, and the way fixing something with his hands helped silence the static in his head. It was the silence of grief that still buzzed sometimes 5 years since Beth's accident, and it could still swallow him whole if he wasn't careful. But tonight, the silence was interrupted by a voice. "Dad." "I finished all my spelling words." Jack turned, peeking up over the counter. Lily, in her oversized hoodie, was seated at table 6, swinging her legs and beaming like she'd just won an Olympic medal. Her backpack was unzipped crayons and flashcards spilling out like a mini explosion of chaos. He smiled, wiping his hands on a towel. "That's awesome, sweetheart. Let me finish this last wire and we'll check them together. You always say that she teased, but she returned to her drawing content." A waitress passed by with a tray of pasta, and Jack recognized her instantly. Ella, the same girl from Brooklyn. He hadn't realized she'd been transferred downtown. There was something different about her here. Less guarded. Still quiet, but more composed, like someone learning how to breathe again after being underwater too long. Their eyes met for a fleeting second. She blinked, surprised. He gave a small wave, half expecting her to walk past. But instead, she paused. "You're following me now," she said dryly, though her mouth quirked upward just enough to give it away. Jack grinned. "This time, I had a work order. But maybe fate's following you." Ella rolled her eyes. "That's cheesy. I'm a single dad. Cheesy is all I've got." She glanced over at Lily. "Your daughter's cute. She's terrifying. Brilliant, but terrifying. I like her already." He stood brushing dust off his knees. "You like intimidating small children?" "No, I like people who say what they mean." Jack didn't reply at first. Instead, he reached behind the counter, grabbing 2 bottles of sparkling water and handing one to her. "To saying what you mean," he said. She hesitated, then clinked her bottle gently against his. "To that." They stood there for a moment, silent but not awkward. There was something comforting in the ease of their exchange, like slipping into a forgotten rhythm. Jack didn't know what it was about Ella, but something in her reminded him of himself from years ago. Lost, but holding on with quiet courage. Then he noticed the hair clip. She bent to tie her shoe, and the light caught it again. A silver clasp shaped like a petal, inlaid with tiny pearls. It was old elegant, out of place on someone like her. "That's a nice piece," Jack said casually. Ella's fingers brushed it. "Yeah. Kind of strange, isn't it? I've had it as long as I can remember." "Where did you get it?" She shrugged. "My foster mom said it came with me. I used to think it belonged to someone rich, like a lost princess or something." Jack chuckled. "I can see that." "Yeah, well, that was before I learned that foster care doesn't come with fairy tales." There it was again. The wall. He could feel it between them, rising like a shield she didn't even know she was lifting. He decided not to push. "Some of the best stories don't start pretty," he said, "but they end better than you'd ever expect." Ella tilted her head. "Are you always this positive?" "No," Jack admitted, "but I've learned that hope is a habit, and I've got a little girl who watches everything I do." She smiled, small, soft, real. "She's lucky." "No," Jack said, glancing at Lily with warmth that seemed to radiate from his very core. "I'm the lucky one." Ella looked away, but not before he saw the flicker in her eyes. Longing, maybe, or memory. He didn't press it. He just stood with her in the silence, offering presence instead of pressure. Across the room, Harold Campiano stepped into the restaurant's front vestibule, unnoticed, his overcoat damp from the rain. He moved like a man walking through a memory, slow, precise, hesitant. He wasn't there for dinner. He was there for her. From the far end of the dining room, his eyes locked on Ella. She laughed at something Jack said, head tilted slightly, the pearl clip catching light once more. That laugh, it wasn't a stranger's laugh. It was Isabel's. It was the echo of his wife's laughter when they danced in the kitchen with their newborn swaddled in his arms. It was 30 years of waiting and searching condensed into one instant. He stepped forward, then stopped. She looked so alive, so herself. What would he even say? "Excuse me, you might be my daughter." No, not here, not like this. He turned and left quietly unnoticed. Later that night, after the restaurant closed, Jack gathered Lily's things as she finished her drawing. "Done!" she exclaimed, holding up a crayon portrait, a woman with a bun, a man in blue, and a small girl with 2 braids. Ella looked over, eyebrows lifting. "Is that me?" Lily nodded solemnly. "I put you in because you make Daddy smile." He hasn't smiled like that in a long time. Jack turned away, but not before Ella saw the way his jaw clenched and eyes watered just slightly. She knelt beside Lily and whispered, "Thanks for including me. I think it's the best picture I've ever been in." That night, as Jack drove home with Lily asleep in the back seat, he kept thinking about Ella. And somewhere across town, Harold stared at his phone, Ella's employee profile pulled up on screen. He tapped the screen once, then once more, and whispered, "Please, let it be you." Ella stood at the locker in the back corridor of the Brooklyn Heights, Campiano's fingers fumbling with the dial. Her shift had just ended, but her heart still raced from the unexpected visit by someone she didn't even realize had been watching. The manager had called her in 5 minutes earlier and handed her a corporate sealed envelope. "Head office wants you transferred to the flagship in Manhattan," he said with a neutral face, but the tone behind his words hinted at something else. Reluctance, maybe even irritation. "Effective immediately. You start tomorrow, no warning, no explanation. Just go." Ella reread the letter for the 5th time. The words blurred, heavy, and strange. Selected for developmental opportunity at Campiano Central. Potential management track. temporary relocation, full salary continuation. She'd only worked here 6 months. Before that, she'd bounced between waiting tables and cleaning offices, always one bad shift away from being let go. But now, they wanted her at the flagship on a management track. It didn't feel like a promotion. It felt like being watched. Across the city, Harold Campiano sat in the back of his private car, a black Lincoln with leather seats that always felt colder than they looked. Rain glazed the windows as the driver eased through midtown traffic. "Is she on the schedule for Central?" he asked without looking up from the file in his lap. "Yes, sir," replied Jared, his discreet security chief seated beside him. "Shift starts tomorrow at noon." Harold nodded once. The file in his hands held everything they'd found, what little there was. No birth certificate, no known biological family, registered in the foster system at 18 months, multiple placements, mostly stable but no formal adoption ever completed. And then there was the clip. He held the photo beside the printout of the current video still. Side by side, they were identical. And yet, he was terrified. What if he was wrong? What if he stepped into this and shattered a stranger's life just to try and fix his own? At home that night, Ella sat alone on the edge of her couch, the apartment too quiet around her. Her foster mother had been moved to a care home just 2 weeks earlier, her memory vanishing by the day. The silence in the apartment felt like it was growing claws. She took the clip from her hair and held it between her fingers. Its edges were smooth now, worn down by years of habit. It was her only keepsake, the only thing that had followed her from group home to group home like a ghost of something forgotten. Sometimes she imagined it had belonged to a mother who loved her, who meant to come back. Tonight, for the first time, she wondered, what if that was true? She turned her head toward the small box of belongings she hadn't opened in months. Letters, scraps, a single childhood photograph of her in an unknown garden, with a woman whose face had been torn away by time. Ella opened the box slowly. Inside, tucked into a folded piece of paper, was a hospital tag, Reynolds, female, 3 days. No first name. No date. Just that. She stared at it, her heart a fist in her chest. The next morning, Manhattan greeted her with gray skies and a wind that cut through her coat. The flagship Campianos looked nothing like the warm, brick-lined Brooklyn location. This place gleamed modern lines, chrome fixtures, velvet curtains on the windows. It felt like a place meant to be looked at, not lived in. The manager at Central, Mrs. Rivera, was a woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense bun and the sharp gaze of someone who had survived decades in fine dining without losing a single tablecloth to carelessness. "You must be Ella," she said without smiling. "They've given you 4 days a week, lunches and prep. You'll shadow Emily and Nicole for service protocols." "Yes, ma'am." Rivera studied her for a moment longer, then gave a single nod. "Good posture. Don't smile unless you mean it. Guests can tell." As Ella changed into her new apron and surveyed the dining hall, she felt the air shift around her, not just from nerves. It was like the building knew something about her she didn't. At one corner table sat a familiar pair of eyes, Jack and Lily. He looked surprised but happy to see her standing halfway out of his chair before managing to steady himself. "Well," he said when she reached their table, "look who followed me this time." She laughed, nervous but honest. "Apparently, I've been promoted. Not sure if it's real or a prank." "I like it," Lily chirped. "It's fancy here. The bathrooms smell like vanilla." Ella glanced around. "It's different," Better Jack asked, searching her face. She shrugged. "I'm not sure yet." There was a pause. A space between words where meaning lived. Then Lily slid a napkin toward her. On it was a new crayon drawing. Ella, Jack, and Lily again. But this time there was a fourth figure in the corner, small, older with a cane and a big smile. "That's your mom," Lily said confidently. "The one you're gonna find soon." Ella froze. Jack looked startled, turning toward his daughter. "Lily?" What the girl said innocently. "She's been sad because she doesn't know her real family." But I think someone's looking for her like in those movies where they get separated and then they hug in the rain." Ella's throat tightened. She wasn't sure if she wanted to cry, laugh, or just walk away and hide. But instead, she reached over and squeezed Lily's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "That's beautiful." Behind the glass wall that separated the dining room from the corporate offices, Harold Campiano watched it all unfold. His heart trembled against his ribs. She had the same way of pausing before saying thank you, the same way of folding her napkin once she stood. Every detail matched what he remembered from long ago. And still he didn't step out. Not yet. He had waited 25 years. He could wait one day more. Ella sat on the worn carpet of her living room floor, the edges of an old cardboard box brushing against her knees. It was well past midnight, but sleep had never arrived. Her shift at Campiano Central had ended hours ago, yet her mind refused to slow. Something was shifting. The air. The way people looked at her. Even the sudden transfer. It didn't feel like a reward. It felt like a setup. But she couldn't tell if it was good or bad. The box before her hadn't been opened in years. She kept it under her bed like a time capsule from a life no one had ever asked her about. Inside were fragments, pieces of herself with no glue to hold them together. A baby sock. A postcard from Kansas she didn't remember receiving. An adoption pamphlet with notes in a social worker's hurried handwriting. Then, near the bottom, she found it. A folded envelope with fragile creases and faded ink. Her name was written in shaky cursive on the front. She stared at it, not breathing. It wasn't her foster mother's handwriting. That woman had always printed in all caps block letters like someone afraid of being misunderstood. Ella opened it slowly. Inside was a small black and white photo, her as a toddler, no older than 2. Chubby cheeks, arms outstretched. She stood in a garden with overgrown grass next to a woman whose face was half-turned from the camera, nearly blurred out of frame. The woman's hand rested gently on her shoulder. On the back, a single sentence was scrawled in faded pen. "She wasn't mine by blood, but I couldn't let her disappear again." Beneath the photo was another relic, a hospital bracelet. Reynolds, female. 3 days. That was it. No date, no time of birth, no mother's name. Ella sat back, her breath shallow. She remembered the story vaguely told once when she was maybe 13. Her foster mother had been vague. "You were dropped off at a hospital. No one claimed you. They passed you around for a bit and then I got the call. That's all." But that wasn't all. This bracelet, this photo, the letter. They were pieces of something buried, something someone had tried to hide, maybe even protect. Her hand moved to the clip in her hair again. Where had it come from? The next morning at Campiano Central, Mrs. Rivera was in a mood. She stood at the host stand, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning like a hawk tracking prey. "Ella," she called. Ella stepped forward, tying her apron. "Yes, ma'am. I'm assigning you to Table 21 today. High-profile reservation. Don't speak unless spoken to. Stay sharp." Ella nodded, confused. Table 21 was rarely used. It was reserved for private parties, usually shielded by a tall partition for discretion. No one had told her who was coming. By noon, the atmosphere had shifted. The kitchen was quieter. Even the chef, normally loud and impatient, kept his voice down. When Ella stepped into the dining room, she saw him. The older man, seated at a table 21, wore a navy suit, subtly tailored with a tie the color of aged wine. He looked like someone used to silence the commanding kind. His silver hair was neatly parted, his posture straight, dignified. He looked vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. As she approached with a tray of water glasses, he looked up. Their eyes met. Her breath hitched just for a second. There was something in his face, not recognition exactly, but something gentler, like he knew her laugh from another life. "Good afternoon," she said, voice steady. "Welcome to Campiano's." "Thank you," he replied softly. She set the water down, noticing how his hands trembled just barely when he reached for the glass. Then his eyes fell on the clip in her hair. She caught the movement. She saw how his fingers paused mid-air. She could feel him watching it. "Would you like to hear today's special, sir?" she asked, trying to distract from the way her pulse hammered in her ears. He shook his head. "No, thank you." She left the table, quickly escaping into the kitchen like she'd touched something hot. Harold Campiano sat back breath shallow. The clip. It was her clip. Or one exactly like it. He had stared at the original so many nights he could trace its pattern blindfolded. But it wasn't just the clip. It was the way she stood, the way she folded her hands when she paused, the way her voice had the faintest tremble when she said, "Good afternoon," but never let it crack. His daughter had once gripped his finger with that same resolve as a newborn, so tight he'd laughed through tears in the hospital. He looked down at the table, unsure whether to cry or get up and walk out. He hadn't said her name in years, but it burned on his tongue now like a prayer. Isabel. That night, Ella walked home in the foggy dusk. The air was thick with the smell of rain and concrete, the kind of weather that made old ghosts feel near. Her thoughts swirled the man, his expression the unmistakable way his gaze clung to her. Was it admiration, curiosity, or something deeper? When she reached her building, she paused before unlocking her door. Her phone buzzed. A message from Jack. "Lily says hi. She drew you another picture. I think it's got a puppy this time." Ella smiled. She typed back, "Tell her I'm honored. I needed something soft today." She didn't mention the man. She didn't know why, but something inside her whispered, "This isn't coincidence. It's connection, and it's coming for you, ready or not." The following week passed in a strange kind of limbo. Ella moved through her shifts at Campiano Central like a ghost who remembered the steps of the living but wasn't sure she belonged among them. Every time she approached Table 21, even though the man in the navy suit hadn't returned, her chest tightened. Something had changed. Not in the schedule, not in the food, not even in the rules, but in the way the world watched her. Mrs. Rivera began assigning her to more high-profile tables. The kitchen crew had stopped calling her new girl and started offering her coffee without asking. Even the head chef, a tyrant with a steel temper, asked for her opinion on plating twice. She should have been thrilled. But Ella had lived long enough on the margins of certainty to know when things didn't add up. Jack texted her twice that week. Once to send her a photo of Lily in oversized rain boots standing beside a cardboard sign that read, "Puppies wanted." No puppy, no plan, just optimism. The second text came after a rainy night shift. "If you're ever tired of being polite to strangers, there's always leftover pizza at our place." She never answered. Not because she didn't want to, because she did. Too much. On Thursday afternoon, her break finally aligned with Jack's maintenance visit. He was replacing an air filtration unit in the back kitchen, grumbling good-naturedly as he balanced on a stool that clearly wasn't built for full-grown men. Ella leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching him with a half-smile. "You know, you could just ask for a ladder." "Where's the fun in that?" She tilted her head. "And if you fall?" He looked down at her and grinned. "Then at least I'll be in the right place for dinner." There it was again, that effortless ease between them. The kind that didn't need to be explained, only felt. The kind that made her wonder what it would be like if she allowed herself to just stay. "I got a weird feeling last night," she said quietly, more to the room than to him. "Like I was being watched. Not in a creepy way, just observed." Jack paused, then stepped off the stool. "You think someone's following you?" "No, not like that." She hesitated. "More like someone's looking for something in me. Something I don't know how to give." He nodded, slowly, serious now. "You ever think it might be someone seeing what you don't?" Ella looked down at her hands. "That's the problem. I don't know what there is to see." Jack didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his toolbox and pulled out a small, hand-carved wooden star. He offered it to her. "What is this?" "Lily made it. Said it was for you." Ella turned it over in her palm. It was imperfect edges, uneven, the middle painted gold. She said, "You looked like someone who forgot she used to shine." Ella's throat tightened. Jack shrugged, trying to play it casual, but there was nothing casual about the look in his eyes. Kids don't lie about things like that. That night, Ella couldn't sleep. She sat on her fire escape, the wooden star in her lap, staring out at the city lights bleeding into fog. She thought about the girl she used to be, the one who used to dream she was a missing princess. The one who imagined a mother somewhere painting or dancing or reading by a fireplace waiting for her return. And then she thought about reality. The boxes, the bracelet, the strange man at table 21. It was as if her past had quietly walked back into her life, waiting for her to notice. Meanwhile, inside a townhouse in the Upper West Side, Harold Campiano stood in front of an open safe. He pulled out the photo again. The same clip, the same eyes. He'd asked himself 100 times if he was sure, and tonight he was done asking. He pulled out a folder from the safe, an adoption record filed under sealed. It had been the last traceable clue before the trail went cold 24 years ago. The mother listed unknown. But now he had a name, Ella Reynolds, and a plan. The next day, Ella arrived for her shift early, half in hopes that the kitchen would be quiet, half to breathe. But as she entered, she saw Mrs. Rivera waiting. "Change of schedule," Rivera said. "Mr. Campiano is coming in for lunch. He's requested you personally." Ella froze. The owner, Rivera, gave a clipped nod. The owner. "Why me?" Rivera didn't answer. She just handed Ella a fresh apron and said, "Iron it. And don't be late." When the lunch crowd thinned and the restaurant quieted, Ella walked toward table 21 with a practiced smile and her pulse pounding in her throat. Harold sat alone, his expression unreadable, hands folded. "Good afternoon," she said softly. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied her face with something like reverence. "Miss Reynolds," he finally said, "would you sit with me? I'm just staff, sir. Not today." She sat unsure why. Then Harold reached into his coat and pulled out a familiar object, a copy of the same hospital bracelet she had tucked away in her box at home. He set it on the white linen tablecloth between them. Ella's breath caught. "I believe he said gently that you may be my daughter." The world didn't fall silent. It shattered. Not with sound, but with everything it had taken her years to hold together. She stared at the bracelet, then at him, and all she could whisper was, what the bracelet sat between them on the pristine white linen like a detonator, quiet but capable of blowing her world apart. Ella didn't move, didn't blink. Her hands stayed folded in her lap knuckles, bloodless. Harold Campiano sat opposite her, composed in the way only people with practice at grief can be. There was nothing dramatic about his delivery. No tears, no dramatic reveal. Just the calm certainty of someone who'd waited so long for truth that the silence now felt sacred. "I don't understand," she said at last, her voice low and tight. "Why would you think that? Why me?" He didn't reach across the table. He didn't invade her space. Instead, he nodded toward the bracelet. "When you were taken from the hospital 25 years ago, that tag was all that was left behind. The nurses said you were wearing it. We kept it. Hoping." "I wasn't taken," she said quickly, instinctively. "I was left at a hospital in Kansas. When I was a baby." His jaw tightened. "Yes, because that's where she brought you. After she disappeared from New York. The woman who took you, who raised you, worked in one of our kitchens. She disappeared the same night my daughter was kidnapped." Ella's breath caught. "You think she stole me. I think she was sick. Desperate. And I think she thought she was protecting you in a way only she could understand." Ella stared at him. Her mind flashed to the torn photograph, the letter, the faint tender writing. "She wasn't mine by blood, but I couldn't let her disappear again. I don't remember her ever hurting me," she whispered. "I don't think she meant to," Harold said. "But what she did, it wasn't right. You had a family. You had a name. He pulled a photograph from the inner pocket of his jacket and placed it gently beside the bracelet. In the photo, a younger Harold held a baby in a hospital room, his wife leaning in beside him, smiling. The baby had a head full of dark hair, tiny fingers wrapped around Harold's thumb. Her name was handwritten in the corner, Isabel Ann Campiano. Ella stared at it as if looking too long would make it disappear. "I remember nothing," she said, voice shaking. "I don't remember you. Or her. I don't even remember Kansas that well." "That's okay," Harold said. "You don't have to remember. I just need you to know." The photograph blurred in her vision. She stood up suddenly. "I need to go." "Ella," she shook her head. I'm not ready. I don't know what this means. You don't have to know right now. But you've known," she said. "You've known for what weeks, months you had people watching me, moving me to Manhattan. You've been pulling strings while I've been serving pasta and wondering why everyone suddenly cares if my apron is ironed." Harold didn't deny it. I had to be sure. She backed away. "And what now? You want me to, what, come home with you? Let you rewrite 25 years of someone else's life?" "No," he said softly. "I just want you to know you were never forgotten. Not for one single day." That stopped her. The words didn't feel like a weapon. They didn't sound like guilt. They sounded like mourning. Still, she turned and walked away, the bracelet and photograph left untouched on the table. Outside, the cold March wind slapped her cheeks. She didn't cry. She couldn't. It felt like her body had gone numb, her chest packed with cotton and cement. She walked without direction, block after block, past brownstones and bodegas, construction sites, and yellow cabs. Finally, she ended up where her legs always seemed to take her when the world felt unstable, Jack's apartment. It wasn't glamorous, just a second-story walk-up with peeling paint and a crooked mailbox, but the lights were warm, and the sound of Lily's laughter leaked through the crack under the door. She almost left. Then the door opened. Jack stood there holding a pot of macaroni with a wooden spoon sticking out like a flag of surrender. "Hey," he said, surprised. "You okay?" She looked at him, just looked until her chin wobbled. "I think someone just told me I don't know who I am," she whispered. Jack put the pot down without a word and stepped aside. She came in and collapsed onto the couch. Lily was on the floor drawing another picture, this one of 3 stick figures and a dog with a pink collar. "I made you a puppy," she said proudly, showing it to Ella. "Her name is Toast." Ella laughed a broken sound. "Thank you." Jack handed her a glass of water, sat across from her, and waited. She told him everything. The bracelet, the photo, the man with her face in his eyes. When she finished, Jack was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "That's a lot. But it doesn't change who you are, doesn't it?" "No," he said. "You're the woman who brings Lily napkins folded into flowers, who works 12-hour shifts and still remembers people's birthdays, who looks at everyone like they deserve a second chance even if no one ever gave her one." She bit her lip hard. "He said my name was Isabel. Do you like it?" She thought for a second. "No. I like Ella." Jack smiled. "Then that's who you are." Late that night, alone again in her apartment, Ella stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. She looked the same. But something inside her had shifted. Maybe Harold Campiano was right. Maybe she'd been taken from a life meant for her. But maybe, just maybe, she'd become someone stronger than that life ever could have made her. She wasn't a missing piece in someone else's puzzle. She was her own. And whatever came next, it would be on her terms. But first, she had to decide, would she run again, or finally turn and face the truth? It had been 3 days since Ella had walked out of Campiano Central with the photograph and bracelet burning a hole in her bag. 3 days of silence. She hadn't returned Harold's calls, hadn't answered Mrs. Rivera's increasingly cryptic texts, and she definitely hadn't shown up for work despite the sense of guilt tugging at her every time she passed a restaurant window. Instead, she stayed in her apartment, her tiny second-floor space that smelled faintly of lavender and wood polish where nothing fancy had ever happened, and no one had ever called her anything but Ella. It was safe, small, familiar, and suddenly it felt like a lie. She sat on her couch with the photo again, staring at the baby in Harold's arms. Her eyes, Ella's eyes, were crinkled with laughter. The woman beside him, presumably his wife, had the kind of beauty that felt effortless. Her hands were wrapped protectively around both of them, and on her pinky, a delicate ring, a single pearl. The same shape, Ella realized slowly, as the clip she still wore in her hair. She reached up and touched it. The curve of it no longer felt ordinary. It felt like a breadcrumb someone had left behind on purpose. That evening, Jack showed up with takeout and a tired smile. He didn't ask permission. He just set the food on the coffee table and dropped down beside her like he belonged there. Because somehow, by now, he did. Lily was at a sleepover, her first ever, and Jack looked halfway like a man with free time and halfway like a father trying not to call the host family every 10 minutes. Ella didn't say anything for a while. She just leaned her head on his shoulder. Jack let her. I keep thinking, she murmured, that if I open the door to all of this, I'm going to lose myself in it. Like I'm going to become who they want me to be, not who I chose to become. Jack was quiet. Then he said, "You know what I remember most about law school? You went to law school for about 5 minutes, before Lily came along." He smiled faintly. "But yeah, I remember the professor saying something that stuck with me. He said, your name might come from your parents, but your character, that's yours to shape. No court can change that." Ella looked at him. Jack met her gaze. "You're still you, no matter where you came from, no matter what he says." "I don't even know if I want to be found," she admitted. "Part of me still wants to believe my life, this version of it, is enough." He nodded. "But part of you wonders who you might have been." Ella nodded back, voice barely above a whisper. Yes. The next day, she made a decision. Not because she was certain, but because running hadn't brought her peace and maybe standing still would. She called Mrs. Rivera first. The woman answered on the second ring with clipped formality. "I was told not to pressure you," Rivera said immediately, "but I'm relieved you called. Is he still in the city, Mr. Campiano?" "Yes. Can you tell him I'll meet him?" 1 hour, but not at the restaurant. "Where then?" Ella looked out the window, eyes landing on the small neighborhood park where she used to read after late shifts. The place with the rusted bench and the creaky swing. A park in Brooklyn. "I'll send the address." The sun was low in the sky when Harold arrived. He walked slowly, not like a man who was old, but like someone trying to remember how to be gentle. Ella sat on the bench already, her back straight, hands clasped in her lap. She didn't stand when he approached, but she did nod toward the space beside her. He sat. Neither spoke for a full minute. Finally, she broke the silence. "Why didn't you say my name that day?" He turned slightly surprised. At the restaurant, she nodded. "I didn't know if I had the right." That surprised her. "You're my father." "Yes. But you didn't know that, and I didn't want to take something from you without asking." She looked down at the bracelet now resting in her palm. "Isabel," she said aloud, testing it. It sounded soft, formal, like a name meant for someone who knew which fork went with which salad. "I don't remember that name," she said finally. "I know. I don't feel like her." Harold smiled gently. "Then don't be. You don't owe anyone the person you used to be or the one we imagined you'd become." He reached into his coat again and handed her something else. A letter, sealed, yellowed slightly at the edges. "My wife, your mother, wrote this the week you were born," he said. "She kept a journal for you. This was the first letter. We were saving it for your 18th birthday." Ella stared at the envelope. She didn't open it, not yet. She tucked it into her coat pocket like something fragile. Then she said, "I'm not ready to change my name. You don't have to. And I don't know if I want to be in charge of a restaurant empire or whatever it is you think I was meant for." Harold nodded. fair. But I am willing to start knowing you." At that, Harold's eyes glistened. "Then that's enough for me," he said. That night, Ella returned home and stood in front of her bathroom mirror again. She didn't look different, but she felt different. Not like a stranger, not like a new person, but like someone who had finally stood in both halves of herself and had chosen to stay whole. She picked up her phone and texted Jack tomorrow night. "Pizza. Your place? I'll bring the napkins." Then she looked at the mirror one last time and whispered to her reflection, "Ella, Isabel, both, and still me." The next few days unfolded like a quiet unraveling. Ella returned to Campiano Central, and for the first time in her life, people looked at her differently, but not in the way she feared. There was no whispering behind her back, no exaggerated courtesy. Just an unspoken understanding, a respect that didn't need to be named. She was still Ella, but now there was a story behind her eyes that even the toughest shift couldn't wash away. Still, the weight of it followed her home. It clung to her shoulders in the silence between conversations. It hummed in the moments after laughter. It waited in the gap between the girl she had been and the woman she was trying to become. Jack noticed. He always did. They sat together that Saturday evening on his back porch, the spring air warm and smelling faintly of cut grass and the neighbors' blooming lilacs. Lily was inside watching a movie, humming softly through the screen door. Ella stared into her lemonade like it held answers. Jack leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "You've been quiet. I've been adjusting to being an heiress," he teased gently. She shot him a look, but there was no bite behind it. "Don't start. I'm just saying," he grinned. "If you suddenly show up in a limo, I'll know what happened." Ella sighed. "What if I told you I don't know what I want anymore? Not with him. Not with all of this. I thought finding out where I came from would feel like closure, but it just opened more doors I'm not ready to walk through." Jack's voice softened. "Closure isn't always about slamming a door shut. Sometimes it's just standing in the doorway long enough to breathe." She looked at him, and for a moment there was a stretch of stillness between them, comfortable and electric at once. Then she said, "I still wear the clip, you know, even though I know where it came from now. I don't think it matters where it came from. I think it matters who chose to keep it." She studied him. "You always say the right thing." "No," he said quietly. "I just say the true thing. You're the one who does something brave with it." Later that night, after Ella had gone home, Jack sat alone in his kitchen drinking tea from a chipped mug. The apartment was still. Lily had fallen asleep halfway through her movie, her small hands wrapped around a stuffed bear with one ear missing. Jack glanced at his phone. He'd almost told Ella tonight. Almost told her what Lily had asked the week before, innocently curiously the way only children could ask. "Do you think Ella would ever be my real mom?" He hadn't answered then, and he wasn't sure he could answer now, because as much as he wanted to believe that this thing growing between them was steady and inevitable, he knew too well that some people had been torn apart too many times to trust the stitching. The next day, Ella visited the care home where her foster mother now lived. The building was clean and warm, with soft lighting and nurses who smiled tiredly. The kind of place where time moved slower because there were fewer people left trying to outrun it. Her foster mother, Margaret, sat in a chair by the window staring out at the courtyard. Her once bright eyes were fogged now, her voice faint and inconsistent. Some days she remembered Ella's name. Most days she just called her sweetheart. "Hi, Margie," Ella said softly, kneeling beside her. Margaret turned, blinking slowly. "You brought the sun with you again." Ella smiled. "I think the sun was already here." She took Margaret's hand, thin, papery, but still warm. "I found out something," she said. "Something big." Margaret blinked, distant. "I found out who I was. Before you. I met him." She waited. "Nothing." Then just barely, Margaret murmured, "You always were a gift. I didn't steal you. I just couldn't let go." Ella nodded, tears stinging. "I know," she whispered. I understand now." Margaret reached up slowly, brushing Ella's cheek with shaking fingers. "Still my girl," she said, and then closed her eyes, drifting back into sleep. Ella stayed there a long time, her head resting gently against Margaret's leg, the silence not painful now, but full, whole, forgiving. That evening, Ella returned to her apartment and sat in the quiet. She didn't turn on music. She didn't reach for her phone. She reached for the envelope instead, the one Harold had given her in the park, the one with her mother's handwriting on the front. She opened it. Inside was a letter. The paper was delicate, but the ink had held up. "My darling Isabel, I don't know who you'll become or what your voice will sound like when you laugh, or if you'll grow to love painting or poetry or dancing barefoot in the garden like I did. But I want you to know that from the moment I saw you, I knew you would never belong to me. You would belong to the world. You are not a possession. You are a purpose. And whatever this life gives you, don't ever let them tell you that your softness is weakness. Your kindness will be your compass. Follow it even when you're lost. And if you ever feel far from home, close your eyes. Listen to your heart. That's where I'll always be. With all my love, Mom." Ella wept, not in sorrow, not in anger, but in release. And when the tears dried, she folded the letter, neatly kissed the edge of the paper, and placed it beside her pillow. She didn't know what tomorrow held, but she knew who she was now. Ella, Isabel, not either or, both, whole, finally. The spring sun peeked through the blinds of Jack's kitchen, casting golden stripes across the worn tile floor. He stood at the counter flipping pancakes with a precision that only came from years of single fatherhood. Lily sat at the table humming and coloring while periodically sneaking chocolate chips into her mouth. Ella had texted late the night before, "Are you home in the morning? I need a place to breathe." He hadn't hesitated. Always. The knock came right on cue. He opened the door to find her standing there in jeans, a hoodie, and that old clip in her hair still clinging, still symbolic. But something about her was different. Her posture, her stillness, the way she didn't flinch at her own presence. "You look," Jack said, then paused, unsure. "Like I finally stopped running," she offered. "Yeah, like that." He stepped aside, and she stepped in, inhaling the familiar scent of cinnamon and maple syrup. Lily grinned from her chair. "We saved you the biggest pancake." Ella smiled, warmth blooming in her chest. "That's the best kind." As they ate, the room filled with casual chatter about school projects, which crayon colors were superior, and why pancakes were better than waffles because pancakes don't scratch your throat. But beneath it all, a deeper current stirred. After breakfast, Lily settled on the couch to read, and Jack motioned for Ella to follow him outside. They stepped into the modest backyard, a patch of grass, a tired fence, and a garden box filled with stubborn mint. Jack leaned against the porch railing. "You want to tell me where you've been?" Ella took a breath. "With him. My Harold. We've had a few conversations. It's been a lot, I figured. He gave me a letter," she said, "from my mother, my birth mother. She wrote it when I was born." Jack's brows lifted slightly, but he didn't interrupt. She said, "She knew I didn't belong to her, that I belonged to the world." Jack studied her. "And how does that feel? Like someone handed me a name I forgot I was born with, and it fits, but not like a glove, more like a coat I've grown into." He nodded, then asked softly, "So what?" Now Ella hesitated. "I want to go back, to where it started. Not the fancy Manhattan office, the old Campiano's, Brooklyn. That's where I first felt seen, where someone handed me a napkin and said, 'You're not invisible.'" Jack's throat tightened. He didn't need to ask who that someone had been. "I want to build something real," she said. "Not because it's a legacy or an empire, because it's a place where people matter." Jack met her eyes. "You don't need permission, Ella. You never did. She stepped closer. Would you help me? With what? With everything. He laughed softly, the kind of laugh that held disbelief and joy in equal measure. You're serious? I want to open a place, she said. A small one. Not corporate, not perfect, just honest. With long tables and mismatched chairs and pie that tastes like someone's childhood. Jack rubbed the back of his neck. You've thought about this a lot. I've lived it, she said. Now I want to give it back. Over the next few weeks they made plans. Not grand ones, not glossy or investor-backed. Real ones. They visited the old Brooklyn Campianos together, now closed for renovations. Harold had offered it to her quietly with no fanfare, no conditions. If it's going to be used again, he said, let it be by someone who remembers how it felt to cry behind the kitchen door and still show up the next morning. Jack had started sketching layouts. Ella had started writing menu notes on napkins. Lily, ever the mascot, suggested a name, Lily's Table. Because it's where everything starts, she said with certainty, and where people come back to. Ella cried when she heard that. Not the sobbing kind. The kind where a single tear falls and you realize your whole life has led to this single quiet moment. One afternoon, while painting the front sign with Jack, Ella asked him, "Why didn't you ever leave?" After Beth died, Jack paused, brush in hand. "I thought about it," he said. "A lot. But every time I looked at Lily, I knew that if I ran I'd miss the miracle that came next." Ella nodded slowly. "You're that miracle too," he added. She looked at him startled. "I know you've been through hell," he said, "but somehow you made it out, not bitter, not angry. Just better. Kinder." Her voice trembled. "Do you mean that Jack smiled?" "I've never meant anything more." They sat on the stoop as the sun dipped low, the new sign drying above them. Lily's Table. Where kindness begins. Ella leaned her head on Jack's shoulder and he wrapped his arm around her, easy and sure. "I don't know what this is," she whispered. He kissed her temple gently. "It's a beginning," he said. And for the first time in her life she didn't flinch at the idea of staying. She didn't feel like someone living on borrowed space or borrowed time. She felt like someone who had stood still long enough to know this love, this table, this life was hers. And she was finally ready to claim it. The first time the front door of Lily's Table opened to the public, it wasn't with fanfare. There were no press releases, no social media blitzes, no velvet ropes. Just a chalkboard sign on the sidewalk that read, "Grand reopening, come in hungry, leave seen." It was a Saturday morning in late spring. The air smelled like warm pavement and honeysuckle. The sun filtered through the big front windows, bouncing off glass jars filled with fresh-cut herbs and old silverware collected from thrift stores. Mismatched chairs had been sanded and repainted in soft pastels. Handwritten menus sat rolled into napkin rings. Ella stood behind the counter wiping her hands on a clean apron. She glanced around at what they'd built, not perfect but purposeful. Jack emerged from the back, adjusting the music speaker. "You ready?" "Not even a little," she said, laughing nervously. He grinned. "That's a good sign." Lily, standing on a milk crate behind the hostess stand, looked up from the coloring book she'd been using to keep busy for the last hour. "I'm ready." Ella smiled and reached over to squeeze her hand. "Then that makes one of us." The first customers were a retired couple who used to eat at the Brooklyn Campianos every Sunday after church. They paused in the doorway as if trying to reconcile memory with reality. "It smells the same," the man said, voice full of wonder. "Like rosemary and garlic and I don't know." Hope Ella greeted them personally and seated them near the front window. The second group was a young woman and her son. The boy had autism, and the woman nervously asked if it was okay if he made noise. Ella knelt beside him, offered him a basket of crayons, and said, "Hear noise is part of the recipe." By lunchtime, the small space was full. Jack moved between tables, checking on equipment and helping run food. Ella floated from guest to guest, refilling coffee, offering samples of the day's peach tart, and laughing, truly laughing with the kind of ease she never thought she'd find. In the corner, a reserved table remained empty, until Harold Campiano walked in. He wasn't wearing his usual tailored suit. Instead, he wore a blue Oxford shirt, sleeves rolled, hands tucked nervously in his pockets. He paused at the doorway, unsure whether to enter as a CEO or a father. Ella saw him excused herself from the table she was at and met him halfway. "You came," she said. "I wouldn't have missed it." She glanced at the apron he held in one hand. "Is that—" "I signed up for dish duty," he said sheepishly. "If that's allowed." Ella blinked, then laughed, and handed him a clean apron. "Just don't break anything." In the kitchen, Harold washed dishes alongside the teen prep cook who clearly had no idea who he was, and that Ella thought might be the most healing part of all. As she cleared a table later that afternoon, a customer tugged gently at her sleeve. "Excuse me," the woman said. "Are you the owner?" Ella hesitated. "Yes, one of them." "Well, I just wanted to say, this place feels like someone prayed it into existence." Ella's eyes stung, but she smiled. "Thank you. That means more than you know." After the last table cleared, the team gathered in the dining room. Dishes were stacked, chairs lifted. The scent of the last pot of coffee still lingered. Ella raised a glass of lemonade. "To kindness," she said, "and to second chances, and to building a place where no one has to earn belonging." They clinked glasses, even Harold. Then, to Ella's surprise, Jack stepped forward. "I know this isn't on the schedule," he said, voice slightly nervous, "but I have one more thing to say." He looked at her eyes, soft and steady. "Ella, the first time I saw you, you were standing under a fluorescent light with wine on your apron and a fire in your eyes. And I remember thinking, that woman's been through something. But I didn't know then that you'd become someone who could rebuild not just a place, but a heart." He dropped to one knee. The room froze. Lily gasped. "Are you serious right now?" Ella laughed, tears already streaming. Jack pulled out a ring, not flashy, not expensive. Just silver with a tiny engraved lily on its band. "I don't want to fix you. You don't need fixing. I just want to stand still beside you for the rest of my life." Ella opened her mouth, but no words came out. So she nodded, and laughed through the tears, and said the only word that mattered. Yes. Later that night, the restaurant sat quiet in the glow of the cleaning lights. Ella walked through the empty room, fingers tracing the edge of table 6, the one where she first served Lily pancakes she hadn't ordered. The table where her old life had started to end and her real one had begun to bloom. Harold walked in quietly, drying his hands on a towel. "I never thought I'd see this again," he said, looking around. "Neither did I." He took something from his pocket, a small velvet box. "I was going to wait, but I think you're ready." Inside was her mother's pearl ring, not a symbol of wealth, but of intention. "I want you to have this," Harold said, "not because of who you were, but because of who you've chosen to become." Ella held the ring gently, then nodded. "Thank you, Dad." He swallowed hard and smiled. Outside, the sign above the door flickered in the breeze. "Lily's Table, where kindness begins." And behind the glass, in the place where loneliness had once sat, love now had a permanent reservation. Spring melted gently into early summer, and Lily's Table found its rhythm like a song the neighborhood had always known by heart. By 9 every morning, the front windows steamed with the scent of cinnamon rolls and rosemary quiche. By noon, lines began to curl around the block, families, retirees, students, the lonely and the loved, drawn not just by the food, but by something quieter, deeper belonging. Ella had once lived in fear of names, of what they meant, of what they could erase. But now she signed 2 on every form: Ella Reynolds, the girl who endured; Isabel Campiano, the daughter who was found. Both were true. Both were hers. One Monday afternoon, Ella stepped into the back room of the restaurant where a small chalkboard wall displayed scribbles left by guests. The pancakes taste like Sunday mornings. I came alone, but I didn't feel alone. This place knows my name. She ran her fingers over the words and smiled, heart full. In the corner of the room, Harold sat with Lily, teaching her how to fold napkins into swans. "You're getting better," he said, adjusting her hands gently. "I'm going to be the folding manager," Lily declared. Ella leaned against the doorframe and watched them. Her daughter, because that's what it felt like now with the grandfather she never imagined. Not one of power and suits, but of steady hands and quiet redemption. That evening, just before closing, Jack arrived carrying a picnic basket. He wore his usual blue work shirt and a sheepish grin. "You're not allowed to bring outside food into my restaurant," Ella teased. He held up the basket. "Even if it's homemade lemon bars." She narrowed her eyes. "You're lucky I love you." "That's the plan." They spread a blanket on the roof of the building, an old maintenance access spot they'd converted into their unofficial sanctuary. From up there, the city looked softer, like it too had exhaled. They ate lemon bars and watched the sun melt behind the skyline. Ella rested her head on Jack's shoulder. "I didn't think love would feel this quiet," she whispered. He kissed her hair. "The good kind always does." As dusk deepened, Ella reached into her pocket and pulled out the pearl clip, slightly worn, slightly tarnished. "I think I'm ready to let this go," she said. Jack turned to her, brow raised. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "It carried me when I didn't know who I was. But now, I don't need it to remember anymore." She set it beside the candle lantern they'd lit, its light catching on the mother of pearl. Then, from the rooftop, she looked down at the glowing sign below. "Lily's table, where kindness begins." And she thought of all the kindnesses that had saved her. A man who handed her a napkin when the world mocked her. A little girl who saw her not as broken, but beautiful. A father who never stopped believing even when the whole world told him to. A stranger's letter, written in hope, received in time. A restaurant, a table, a name. The next morning, Ella woke early. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror in a white dress, simple flowing, not flashy. Lily burst into the room in a floral crown she'd insisted on making herself. "Do I look like a flower princess?" she asked breathlessly. Ella smiled at her in the mirror. "You look like the most important girl in the world." "You too," Lily said, then paused. "Are you nervous?" Ella thought about that. "No," she said, surprised by the truth of it. "Not even a little." The wedding was held in the restaurant under the string lights and the hand-painted mural Lily had helped design. Friends, neighbors, staff, and a few guests who had once come in as strangers now sat at the long, mismatched tables, clapping and laughing as Jack and Ella exchanged vows. Harold walked her down the aisle. No speeches, just a quiet moment before he handed her off with a kiss on the forehead and eyes full of peace. When Ella said "I do," it was more than a promise to love. It was a promise to keep choosing joy, to keep staying still even when fear whispered otherwise, to keep building tables, families, bridges, to keep remembering that she was never lost, only waiting to be known. That night, after the music faded and the last guest left, Ella stood alone in the dining room. The lights were low. She walked slowly to table 6, the one where it all began. She sat down and placed her palm on the wood, now worn smoother than before. Then she whispered, "Thank you." For the moment she thought was the end. That turned out to be her beginning. And somewhere out in the city, another woman sat alone at a table wondering if kindness still existed in the world. One day, maybe soon, she'd walk into Lily's table. And Ella would greet her not as a stranger but as someone who understood, because kindness never forgets.